Since preschool, we have been taught that in 1620, Pilgrims left England and traveled on the Mayflower to a new world. They would establish a new colony named Plymouth in the future state of Massachusetts. Pilgrims endured miserable conditions for 65 days while crossing the Atlantic Ocean on the Mayflower. Yet, with all the confusion, excitement, trepidation in establishing a colony in a new land, they felt it of the highest importance to establish an institution of higher learning. Think about that. They were creating roads, houses, government, farms, finding resources and supplies, battling illnesses and enemies just to exist and thrive. And yet, 16 short years later, on October 28, 1636, the Massachusetts General Court passed legislature which would lead to the establishment of Harvard College, thus laying the foundation of the first higher education institution in colonial America. Founding fathers and colonists showed the value of education in the new colony as they strived to create a new government and a new nation with educated citizens. Founding leaders feared that a new country founded without a strong pillar of education would lead to chaos. In total, 9 institutions of higher education would be established prior to the American Revolution, and another 250 prior to the Civil War, 182 of which are still in existence today. And currently, there are approximately 4,400 higher education institutions, which include 4-year public and private, HBCUs, tribal colleges, community colleges, and for-profit colleges. But let's look at some of the events in between then and now that have been milestone changes or disruptions altering the course of higher education as we know it. 1799, Washington and Lee University admitted John Chavis as the first African-American man on record to attend college. 1833, Oberlin College was the first institution to admit women into higher education. 1862, Mary Jane Patterson is the first African-American woman to be granted a bachelor's degree from Oberlin College. 1862, the Morrill Land Grant Act was passed by Congress, allowing for expansion of land-grant colleges in the United States, moving us as a nation from family farming focus and into the Industrial Revolution. 1889, first American Indian woman in the United States receives a medical degree from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. 1902, a junior college at the University of Chicago was established that would lay the groundwork for our community college system. 1906, the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, funded by $10 million from Andrew Carnegie, established the definition and metric of a unit, or class equivalent, that has become the national standard by which class credits and credit hours are measured. 1944, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, or the GI Bill, funneled an estimated 7.8 million Americans through the doors of higher education or vocational training programs and into a new and more modern global society. In 1950, Supreme Court case Sweat v. Painter, a black man was refused admission to the University of Texas School of Law. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Sweat. That same day, the Supreme Court ruled on another case, McLaurin v. Oklahoma State Regents, where McLaurin, who had a master's degree, was denied admission to the University of Oklahoma to pursue a doctorate degree in education. And after the ruling, he was admitted. Each of these landmark rulings paved the way for Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka in 1954, which ruled racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional and laid the foundation for continued legal victories and advancements in desegregating institutions of higher education. The Higher Education Act of 1965 expanded access and financial assistance for students commoditizing higher education as a mass market good. 1972, Congress passed the Title IX Act, which prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or any other education program that receives federal funding. Groundbreaking for equity in women and men's sports, but also in the rights of victims of sexual assaults on college campuses. The mass shooting on April 16, 2007 at Virginia Tech that killed 32 victims is cited as the first higher education mass shooting of the modern era. Since then, countless campuses have been affected by gun violence, active shooter drills, and lockdowns. These are just a few of the many examples of change within a system that is often criticized as archaic and positioned for failure. But it hasn't. Higher education continues to reinvent itself. Several higher education organizations have figured out a way to stay relevant and survive. An impressive accomplishment considering the complex and multifaceted organization that modern universities and colleges are. The best analogy for higher education critics and supporters would be comparing higher education to the Titanic. Critics shout that higher education has hit the iceberg and is a sinking ship. The Titanic was a massive enterprise that tried to maneuver itself too late and could not dodge its fate. Higher education, also a massive enterprise, continues to dodge, pivot, and maneuver around obstacles that range from a global pandemic, economic crisis, political acumen, relevancy, and inflation. What do all these events show us? That a change or disturbance which interrupts an existing process or normal course of action is inevitable. In business, disruptive innovation often creates a new market value or displaces established practices. John McGee, in his book Breakpoint, states that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. But not all change in higher education reaches crisis levels. Often categorized as disruptions or changes, disruptions are often less subtle than a crisis. It can take several seemingly unrelated events to create a transitional point in history, so it can be hard to pinpoint an exact disruption. Some larger disruptions are easier to earmark, but others can be harder and take years to play out. For example, in 1745, when Yale made arithmetic a part of its entrance exam, ending the exclusive requirement of solely Greek and Latin. Other institutions soon followed, which eventually led to the end of the medieval curriculum taught in higher education, institutions, and the introduction of the modern curricula. Benjamin Franklin and others chartering the College and Academy of Philadelphia in 1755 as the first secular institution. This would later become the University of Pennsylvania. In 1765, it would open the first medical school in colonial America, opening the door for countless others, thus moving higher education forward. Thomas Jefferson, who believed only educated citizens can make the American experiment in self-government successful, and founded the University of Virginia as a secular institution and the first of its kind to offer a wide array of elective courses. 1876, when Johns Hopkins founded the first graduate school focused specifically on research and scientific inquiry. Would we be as far as we are had someone not tried something different, something outside the norm, something other than this is how we have always done things? History has shown us that disruptions in higher education are both people and events. Evidence of trailblazer innovators who had a vision for the future of higher education and positively impacted an institution, or who have advocated for access to education to populations of students that otherwise might not be represented, or can even afford to attend, or an even pivotal change that has changed the perspective of many. A disruption, regardless of the size, can cause ripples through the higher education system, affecting change and forward progression. Moving into the examination of the more modern-day era of higher education, John McGee states again, nearly all colleges and universities today must address three important disruptive forces that have fully emerged by 2010 and have intensified since then: demographic disruption, economic disruption, and values disruption. The Great Recession of 2008 was the worst economic downturn in the United States since the Great Depression, directly affecting families and their ability to afford to send their children to higher institutions with price tags that continue to increase, thus questioning the affordability and relevancy of a higher education degree. Long anticipated and predicted, higher education has arrived at the precipice of the looming enrollment cliff. Set in motion 15 to 18 years prior, families in our nation started having less children. This decline is tied with the Great Recession as economic uncertainty led families to slower rates of growing families. This translates to 15% less, or roughly 500,000 less 18-year-olds enrolling in higher education institutions starting in 2025. The value of a degree from higher education institution is being called into question. Does the debt that a student takes on pay off after graduation? Do students really learn? And do they learn skills that set them up for success with an employer? Does the faculty truly inspire, teach, and allow critical thinking, or have they succumbed to great inflation? Does the institution have full-time faculty, new dorms, good meal plans, and other competing amenities? The value and importance of higher education varies from family to family, but overall the question remains for the higher education industry at large. Does your institution have a marketable value to convince families to enroll and graduate from your institution? The defined value of higher education matters. In addition to those, we have witnessed and lived through the largest disruption to all industries with the global pandemic of COVID-19, which initially shut higher education down in March of 2020. While this disruption was messy as families scrambled to get their students home from institutions domestically and abroad, the world dealt with a volatile market, job loss, and uncertainty as everyone learned to do things remotely, from working to learning to instructing from the confines of our homes. The pandemic has since taught us how to be more flexible, how to leverage technology and many different technologies faster, and how to think different doesn't mean bad, or that our traditional model was the only way to operate. Instead, it offered us many different modalities of learning and how to showcase the college experience. President Paul LeBlanc of Southern New Hampshire University grew his institution into one of the largest providers of online higher education in the country, exceeding over 160,000 students, and was listed as Fast Company magazine's World's 50 Most Innovative Companies, being the only institution of higher education included by reimagining access to higher education prior to the pandemic. They were prepared for the disruption. Technology has been credited for disrupting countless industries, and higher education is no different. With the invention of the internet, mobile devices, computers, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence, each invention has redefined classrooms and instruction, changing the thought process that we must be in a lecture hall room with rows of students and the teacher at the front of a chalkboard. Technology is proving that the pace of disruption and innovation is accelerating. November 2022, the world was introduced to ChatGPT, which has even further pushed the boundaries of technology as we know it. In just a few short months, it has blazed a trail through the academy with such a fervor it doesn't seem comparable. Administrators are scrambling to adapt policies, faculty are trying to integrate into lecture, and students trying to capitalize on a new technology. We are in the midst of a disruption. What will the next disruption be? Will it be the student debt crisis and President Biden's student loan forgiveness program? Dr. Kovitz, president and CFO of Foundry College, cited in the book Commencement by Katie Colbert and Joe Celesto, said, Foundry College aims to disrupt the traditional two-year college model. Dr. Willis, president of Everett Community College, also cited in Commencement states, I want to see a disruption of higher education, a world without credit hours and without a belief that it takes 50 minutes 3 times a week to learn a particular subject or skill. Current headlines speak to tenure disruptions, challenges toward DEI programs, campus mergers, state and federal funding cuts, campus closures, innovative ways to adapt virtual learning, increased political interference, free speech challenges, cost and affordability, relevance, skills gaps, and increased resources to support a growing mental health epidemic in higher education. Sometimes it's about being the first, the bravest to try something new. Sometimes it's about knowing you need to do the right thing. Sometimes you aren't the first, but you can do it better. And sometimes it's not a person, but an act or an event, like a global pandemic. Regardless, higher education, like the world, is changing at a rapid pace, and more higher education leaders are realizing that to survive, they need to change the game, disrupt the status quo, and change the industry in order to survive and be relevant. Higher education is changing, and so the question is, what will the next wave of disruptions bring? Will it be those items we see trending now, or something yet to be invented or discovered? Will innovative leaders continue to move us forward, expanding learning and access? Will they address the growing costs and affordability? Will it be a wave of new thinkers pushing for change in an industry primed for its next disruption? What will the next wave be, and are we ready?